Hometown Action is a grassroots
I'll tell how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. And we are broadcasting live, online, and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, abortion rights are workers' rights. Your boss is stealing from you, take it back. Conservative politicians continue their war against workers and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, what we're chatting about, what we're tweeting about, you can find us anywhere you find anything online. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we are on YouTube, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. If you want to become a sustaining member of the program, make a one-time donation, or buy our new hat, you can go to TVLR.fm. That's TVLR.fm. You can go to our shop, buy our hat, donate to us. Or you can go to patreon.com/TheValleyLaborReport if you're more familiar and comfortable with that platform. If you're a member of a union, you should get your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to me for more details on that. You should get your local, your international, your regional, whatever, your state council, your union's PAC. You should tell them all to give us money. That's what we need. Did you love that ad that played right before our show started of Phil Williams, who's been running from a conversation with us for weeks now? Adam, did you hear that?
Oh yeah, all about school choice.
Yeah, that was great. It's funny that he's willing to advertise and put a recording of himself in such proximity to us, but he's not willing to actually himself come on and engage. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. But
I'm awfully glad that we are here on this station this morning, providing you a little bit of alternative to the rhetoric on school choice and how you should worship your boss and worship the police and all the other things that they like to talk about.
Yeah, and we'll be getting into some of that school choice stuff, I'm sure, here later in the show, because Adam is going to be giving us a breakdown on Casey Wardenski, who is a former superintendent of Madison County Schools,
Huntsville
City Schools, while Adam was a teachers union staffer. So that was he's got a lot of good stories. He's going to tell us all about that. But first, let's go ahead and jump right into the first topic. Abortion rights are workers' rights. And this is something that we haven't talked a lot about. But, frankly, I think that we need more white men talking about women's bodies. And so we're going to do that today. We don't have enough about that.
Wow.
I think that, I think that it's important that, proper voices be heard about this subject. No, but seriously, this is we have the platform, and so we're going to use it. We're not going to use it for a terribly long time, but we do want to talk about it just shortly, because this is so topical, and we will dive deeper into it in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be reaching out to Holler Health Justice. They are a West Virginia abortion fund and women's advocacy group in West Virginia. They are unionized with the industrial workers of the world. We'll be talking to one of those workers about this issue and how it affects workers in the coming weeks. But we wanted to just set our cards out on the table and say clearly that abortion rights are workers' rights. And because of the news that came out this week, that we look to, which is not a surprise to anybody, or it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, that we are barreling towards a reversal of Roe versus Wade, that we are barreling towards a taking away of a constitutional right that women have had in this country for 50 years. And so saying abortion rights are workers' rights, that may not be something that's intuitive to everybody. And I know that there are some folks that, don't reckon that this is really in our wheelhouse. And I'm sure that there are even people in the House of Labor who are happy about the news from last week that will strip bodily autonomy from women, from working women and working folks across the country. I also know that if you're happy about this decision, even the best argument, even an objectively correct argument about the importance of bodily autonomy, about the tyranny of the state, and how you've got no business telling people that, there's nothing that I can say right now to convince you. And I'm aware of that. Because it's been beaten into your heads, if you believe this way, it's been beaten into your head for decades, likely, that for some reason, a fetus at the moment of conception has just as much worth as a human adult, and thus, and this likely derives, from some religious or spiritual belief. I'm not going to be able to deprogram a lifetime of religious indoctrination. I want to plant some seeds for you, though. I would encourage you, if you are anti-choice, if you are happy about this, and it comes from a religious belief, I would urge you to consider the fact that in the Old Testament, the punishment for murder was death. An eye for an eye, right? That was the punishment for murder. The punishment for an injury to a woman that resulted in a miscarriage is a fine. If there was a biblical basis for life beginning at conception, then the punishment for an injury resulting in a miscarriage would justly be death. But that is not the prescription that the Bible puts out. I would also encourage you to consider the fact that the Old Testament prescribes abortion. Like, this is the thing that the Bible tells people to do in the Old Testament in the case that a woman commits adultery. If a woman commits adultery in the Old Testament, the prescription is to induce abortion. A retort to that is going to be that the Bible says that before you were in the womb, I knew you. And this is something that has never made sense to me, because all that is saying is that before you were a person, I knew you. There's another saying that says, something about like, this happened before you were even a twinkle in your mother's eye. Does that mean that life begins at twinkle in an eye? No, it's an expression. It's an expression saying that this happened before you were a being, before you were formed, before you were a soul, if in a religious sense. Also consider the fact that for the first 100 years of this country, abortion was largely unregulated in all states until what they called a fetal quickening, which is very similar to what Roe Vs Wade put out, which is that abortion is unrestricted in the first trimester. Fetal quickening is just when a baby begins moving, when the fetus begins moving inside of the womb. That's what that was the history of this country at the founding, and for 100 years after it. Why do I want you to consider this, though? And look, I know that nothing that I've said has convinced you, but I do want you to think about it. I want you to think about it, and I want you to think about it hard, because overturning Roe versus Wade will, at first, leave the decision of abortion up to the states, although Republicans will certainly push for a national ban as soon as they get power. This whole states' rights is BS. They do not care about states' rights, because obviously if you genuinely believe that abortion is murder, you're not going to be content with murder being outlawed in Alabama and murder continuing in California. As soon as you get federal power, you will try to outlaw it at the federal level. So let's not be coy. That's coming as soon as they can get there. But it's going to be first left up to the states, which will mean that folks in Alabama are going to be forced by the state to carry a pregnancy to term. That will mean that women will lose their lives. That will mean folks who have a baby in Alabama will lose their income. They'll have to go through all the physical issues that go along with pregnancy against their will. Against their will. Women will die. Women will be inflicted with serious injuries because Alabama has decided that it wants to use the power of the state to enforce the religious convictions of some of its citizens on all of its citizens. That is unacceptable. That is unacceptable. Alabama's abortion ban has no exceptions for rape or incest. That means folks in Alabama will be forced by the state to carry the pregnancy that is the result of rape to term. That is unacceptable. And now it's ironic that this is coming from the institution of the Supreme Court, which is a counter-majoritarian institution. A counter-majoritarian institution it means that it is supposed to be. Its purpose is that it is a bulwark against the will of the majority. The purpose of counter-majoritarian institutions is to protect us from, quote-unquote, the tyranny of the majority. And the majority of people in Alabama do believe that abortion should be illegal in all or most cases, unfortunately. So if the Supreme Court has any place at all, it would be to protect folks in Alabama from the tyranny of the majority who would have them forced by the state to carry out a pregnancy to term. To carry out what could be a life-threatening pregnancy to term. If counter-majoritarian institutions have any role at all, it is to do that. But, of course, the same people who are going to laud this also laud counter-majoritarian institutions, but that only applies to taxes for rich people. This issue is, of course, a workers' issue because workers and their families are going to be the ones affected. Kim Kelly points out in a recent op-ed for In These Times that the United States is already a brutal place to be pregnant and a merciless one in which to raise a child. It's an even worse place to be a pregnant worker. The minimum wage is far too low, the rent is too damn high, and whatever remnants of a social safety net that working people were able to secure in recent decades have since frayed to tatters. Parental and infant mortality rates are deplorable, especially in Alabama, and are especially high for Black and Indigenous folks. We are living through a public health crisis, a housing crisis, a climate crisis, an economic inequality crisis, and a political crisis. Bringing a child into this world should be a choice, not in order. Workers who are forced to surrender their bodies via judicial mandate and deliver unwanted babies are not being protected, are not being respected at work or as people. They are not free. The Association of Flight Attendants President Sarah Nelson said in a statement that not everybody will make the same choices, and that is fine. And AFA's members hold a wide range of personal beliefs on the topic of abortion. But the right for each of us to make our own choices about our jobs, our bodies, and our futures is fundamental. That includes the right to protect safe, legal options to anyone who wants to seek reproductive health care. As union members, we understand democracy in our workplaces and in our public square. Americans overwhelmingly, and this is true even if it's not the case in the state, Americans overwhelmingly support safe and legal abortion. This is not just a radical assault on our rights and settled law. It is an attack on the majority of this country and the ideals upon which it was founded. Unions still have power in this country, and we must use it to fight on this front of the class war that the ruling class has re-engaged. For its members, unions should immediately begin bargaining for abortion provisions in their health care plans, for travel allotments if they have to go out of state, cross state lines for abortion. And we should do this because the ideas that some religious folks, some, not all, the ideas that some religious people have in their heads should not dictate what workers do with their bodies, and they should not be allowed to force a worker to carry a pregnancy to term. It is none of their damn business.
Amen.
And that's that. That's that. We are going to, and like I said, we're going to talk some more about it next week with workers from Holler Health Justice. And and about how this is going to affect workers. But I did think it was important for us to address this today as the news came out. So really quickly before we go to a break, we're going to play a part of an interview that we did with the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division locally. These are local people that work for the Department of Labor in the Wage and Hour Division we talked to them about wage theft, about minimum wage laws, about overtime laws and stuff like that. This is 10 minutes of a 40-minute interview. So if you want to hear the rest of the conversation, you're going to have to subscribe to us on YouTube. But for now, Adam, let's go ahead and play that part of the conversation. All right, so our next guests are going to be from the Department of Labor, the Wage and Hour Division. We have Christina Coleman Lovelace. She is more or less the outreach and, public relations kind of person for the DOL Wage and Hour Division, and Lindsay Arnold is the investigator for the DOL Wage and Hour Division in Huntsville. And we wanted to bring them on because most people have kind of a broad understanding of, hey, I'm supposed to be making at least $7.25 an hour. If I'm not a server. If I'm a server, I should be making at least $2 an hour, $2.13 an hour. And I should have, there are some overtime protections that I'm vaguely aware of, right? These are things that people have vague notions of, like, these are protected rights that I have in the law. But I don't think, even for myself, most people have a good understanding of actually what the law is and actually how to make sure it's enforced. We're a Union Talk radio show, and so one of our first things is that you should do a union about it and enforce it yourself. And that's, that is a tried and true method of getting higher wages, better benefits, overtime protections, things like that. But let's say you don't have a union, or let's say you don't want to wait for a campaign and, you feel like your rights are being violated now. What can you do about it? So we wanted to talk to them about it. Christina, Lindsay, thank you very much for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Christina, tell us what the law is specifically as it relates to wage and hour. What are the things that workers in America, workers in Alabama, ought to expect when they work for an employer?
Well, we are the Wage and Hour Division. And one of the most broadest applications governing that particular act, of course, is the Fair Labor Standards Act. And that's governing minimum wage, overtime pay, youth employment. Outside of the Fair Labor Standards Act, we also pretty much enforce the Family Medical Leave Act, known as FMLA. We enforce the Migrant Seasonal Agriculture Worker Protection Act. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know this, but we actually enforce the Employee Polygraph Act and the Wage Garnishment Provisions Act, as well as the Davis-Bacon and related acts, the McNair and O'Hara Service Contract Act, and of course the Temporary Worker and Provisions Act. So there's acts that we actually enforce, but one of the biggest, most common acts that we actually enforce is that minimum wage at that $7.25 an hour. Right now, that is the federal minimum wage. We have a lot of states that actually pay their employees more than that $7.25. But for the state of Alabama and every other state within the United States of America, we're just stating that that $7.25 is at the federal minimum wage. If a state decides to pay $10 an hour, or like California, $12 or $13, or DC at $15, that's at the state minimum wage. We're just saying that you can't go below that $7.25.
Right. And so then the states would be it would be their job to enforce the state minimum wage. Y'all are just going to be making sure that, people across the country are paying at least $7.25. And I think, especially in this economy, you hear a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, and it is difficult, I think, for a lot of people to understand that this is actually an issue, and that law, the 725 law, actually does get violated still. Can you talk to us about that yes, people do still pay the minimum wage or below it?
Yes, they do. I mean, Lindsay can probably speak to you about that more, but not only that, Jacob, we have it set at $7.25 per hour. And I think that's been effective since 2009. And a lot of trainings that I do, I have to let them know that that's cash or equivalent, and that's free and clear, which means that you have to pay them in cash. You cannot pay them at $6 with a coupon, and $6 in cash, and $1.25 with a coupon to equal to the $7.25. There has been cases where people have actually paid someone $6 and would give them the $1.25 for a meal or something of that nature. So we're one of the ones that just are investigators, such as Lindsay, are one of the main ones that make sure that we enforce that $7.25 an hour. We make sure that we let all employees know. That doesn't speak for tipped credit or for tipped employees, because we do have those employees that you mentioned earlier that are paid federal law $2.13 an hour. But you have to say that you at least have, I think, make tips of at least $5.12 an hour to equal the $7.25 an hour. So you sometimes have a tipped credit where the manager or supervisor is basically stating that that employer is going to guarantee that they make that $5.13 or $5.12 an hour in tips. If they don't, they have to pay them that amount in tips to equal the $7.25. So the $2.13, which is low for a tipped employee, plus the $5.12 makes the $7.25 an hour. So we spend a lot of time, myself, educating and training a lot of companies on the laws that we enforce as it pertains to FLSA, as it pertains to FMLA. But one of the major components of the acts that we basically see a lot of violations in is the FLSA, which includes minimum wage, overtime. We see a lot of overtime issues and even record keeping.
Let's talk about overtime then. Who is actually eligible for overtime? Because I know that salaried employees, for some reason, companies are able to get around my understanding is that they can get around the overtime law and not have to pay overtime if the employee is salary. And so how do you, as an employee, know whether or not you are entitled to overtime, which is time and a half after 40 hours?
Okay, so actually, in order to be exempt from overtime, it's actually a two-pronged test. You have to make a salary that remains the same regardless of your hours worked. And starting January 1st of 2020, that salary amount increased from $455 a week to $684 a week. And again, that is remains the same regardless if you work 50 hours, 80 hours, 20 hours, that salary has to remain the same. And then the second part of the test to be exempt from overtime is a duties test. So either, and there's 5 or 6 different ones, but essentially if you are a supervisor, meaning you supervise 2 or more full-time employees, you hire, fire, you schedule, discipline, train, that would be one of the duties in which you would be, that would meet that exemption part or the duty part of that exemption test. Another one is there's computer. You're actually like a programmer. You're not an IT person. You are actually writing code, something like that. There's a couple little, differences with that particular computer exemption. We have professional exemptions for lawyers, doctors, teachers. We have administrative exemption, which covers employees that make decisions that affect the financial, outlook of the company. These, they're not, an administrative assistant is normally not going to qualify under that particular duties test. But administrative exemption is someone who is, entering into contracts of $1 million or buying stuff for the company with the company credit card without approval from, the big boss for $100,000 here or there. Those are the type of, people that really do affect the financial, outlook of the company. So those are some of the ways to be exempt from overtime. So it's not just that salary, it's also a duties, part of, in order to be exempt from overtime.
How do I, as a worker, go about enforcing this? If I feel like, if I'm listening to this and I say, I don't think that my position actually qualifies for the overtime position or for the overtime exemption, or I'm thinking that I'm not actually being paid $7.25 or they're giving me $6 in a coupon or something like this. How do I go about ensuring that this is enforced?
Well, actually, you'll reach out to our offices. We have an office in Huntsville, Montgomery, Mobile, and Birmingham. So if you have any indication that you feel that your rights have been violated, where you're not being paid the $7.25 an hour, where you feel that you're not being paid overtime at anything over 40 hours in a work week, you'll reach out to one of our offices. You'll come. You can either walk in, you can call us. We have people on staff from, I think it's 8 o'clock a.m. until 5 o'clock p.m. So feel free to contact us. Visit our website. Feel free to visit our website at www.dol.gov/WHD. And you can find any one of our offices throughout the country and our contact information to reach out to us. And you'll have someone, what we call a wage and hour technician, who will take your complaint. They'll make sure that they can forward it on to an investigator. They'll review the information and see if there has been one of your rights that have been violated.
Is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know about how viable clean and renewable energy is. To that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to more than thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state. We're working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about our work and how you can join us at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Is our audio going out on no audio? Still no audio from on the YouTube and the Facebook.
All right, that should be fixed now. Again, I apologize. This morning we're just having some technical glitches here on our settings, but hopefully you guys can hear us now.
Okay, yeah. Let us know in the chat if you can hear us. Good now. Good. We could hear ads and the music, but no audio from YouTube. That's weird. But now you hear us, presumably, I guess. I appreciate the feedback. That helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Us. There you go. All right. Thanks, guys. So, yeah. Well, I just asked. I just asked Adam if he was born before 2020 and 2018, and he confirmed that he was, and we also both confirmed that we were both born at such a time that we were adults in 2018 and 2020, actually. And so because both of us were live and both of us were adults at that time, then we remember those elections. We remember those elections, and we remember those elections for Congress. And in 2018 and 2020, Mo Brooks ran for re-election, and in both of those elections, he had an opponent. In 2018, he had a primary opponent, Clayton henchmen who wanted to debate him. He told WHNT at the time, Mo Brooks did, that it was declining to comment at this time on any of henchmen's comments, whether they be false negative attacks or debate offers, right? And this is henchman is another Republican, and they ultimately did not debate. That was the outcome of that. He also had a general election opponent in that year who wanted to debate Peter Jofrion. Peter Jofrion wanted to debate Mo Brooks during the general election, and Mo Brooks told AL.com that we will mull Mr. Jofrion's request over, but at this time we are not inclined to give a platform to a campaign that has repeatedly engaged in dishonest campaign tactics. They ultimately did not debate. In 2020, he had a primary candidate who was endorsed by several Alabama Republican Party leaders, who was Chris Lewis, and Mo Brooks did not debate him either. So we've got a pattern here of Mo Brooks refusing to debate, and each time trotting out the line, basically, that he did not want to legitimize false attacks. Well, it's interesting then that Mo Brooks last week put out an op-ed in the same media project that brought you the fluff interview with the flat earth pro-military coup gubernatorial candidate, lambasting his primary opponents for refusing to acquiesce to his incessant debate offers. He even cites as a reason for wanting to debate, he wants to correct their false attacks on him. That's interesting, because last time he didn't want to platform them, but now he wants to attack them for his... So that's definitely a reversal. But, look, that's all politics. I just thought it was funny. Not going to spend a lot of time on that. But it's all politics. He wants debates when he reckons it'll help him politically and doesn't when they won't. Whatever. But what irked me was the last bit of his op-ed where he spoke loftily about the virtues of public debate, saying essentially that anything less than his opponents conceding to his demand to a debate is a disservice to the public. That a candidate, quote, a candidate who is afraid of the public has no business serving in public life.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. I agree. Right. I agree with him. I agree with Mo Brooks. Clip that if you want. I agree with Mo Brooks that his opponents should debate him, because I also think, but I legitimately believe this, Mo Brooks is just lying. Mo Brooks is just lying and saying whatever he feels like he needs to. That's what's happening there.
Probably because he's losing.
Because he's losing.
Sucks to be a loser.
Because he's really, his feelings are hurt that he's losing and no one cares about him anymore. And so he's crying about it.
Poor guy.
And now he's trotting out all this, chest thumping, like public value, virtue of, the light of day and all this stuff. But to be willing to put pen to paper, as it were, with those words after your record of refusing to engage with political opponents is just amazing. But, that's what politicians do. They lie. So, speaking of lying politicians, we
have another one.
We've got another one. Is that right? We've got more than one lying politicians in North Alabama?
It would seem. It would seem that way, yes.
Yeah, so
you want me to talk about one of them?
Yeah. Adam, tell us about Casey Wardenski.
All right, y'all. Well, buckle up. We're going for a ride. Doing a little bit of deep dive here on Casey Wardenski, who is a Republican candidate for Alabama's 5th Congressional District, which many of our listeners know includes Huntsville and most of North Alabama. And it is currently held by that guy, Mo Brooks, we were just talking about. So the story of Casey Wardenski tells us a lot about corporate education reform, Huntsville politics, and the ways that big money interests shape our public institutions and harm the working class. Wardenski is a retired Army colonel, and he was appointed as Assistant Secretary of the Army for the last 2 years of the Trump administration, and he was superintendent of Huntsville City Schools from 2011 to 2016. And it's his role as superintendent that I'm most familiar with, as I taught in Huntsville during his administration. And for the last 15 months or so of his regime, I was a field staffer for the Alabama Education Association, serving as an official representative of Huntsville educators. And I'm disclosing that up front, both so you know my bias and so you know my personal role in this story. Now, Wardenski did work at West Point for part of his stint in the Army, but his biggest claim to fame is probably his leading role on America's Army. America's Army was a video game designed and distributed by the Army as a recruitment tool. This may be a little bit before your time, Jacob, but I remember it quite well. This was in the 2000s during the height of the wars in the Middle East, and the Army was looking for new and creative ways to convince young men to travel halfway across the globe to kill and be killed for a series of ever-changing justifications. It was America's Army that really got military recruiters enmeshed in the world of video games, and that presence has since grown over the years to encompass so-called esports teams, Twitch streaming, and more. It was also a new method of targeting boys before they were old enough to enlist, with the goal of grooming them as future recruits, while, of course, harvesting their data. Given the dominance of the military-industrial complex in Huntsville and America generally, suppose it shouldn't be much of a surprise that this is the kind of guy some folks wanted in charge of public education. Now, after retiring from the Army, Wardenski spent a year as CFO of Aurora Public Schools in Colorado. Even more importantly, though, in his transition into education from the military was his attendance at the Broad Academy. The brainchild of billionaire Eli Broad, his academy was like a boot camp for aspiring school system superintendents coming from private industry as well as the military. While most aspiring educators learn about pedagogy and child development and classroom management, the graduates of the Broad Academy were well versed in how to go after teachers' unions, consolidate schools, privatize services, and manipulate data. Google the Broad virus and you'll see some of the notorious graduates of this program who went on to wreak havoc on public schools from Seattle to Chicago to DC to all the way down here in Alabama. And let's take a step back and remember the context. We had the Great Recession in 2008, which was followed by austerity at the national and state levels. Public education and its largely unionized female workforce was already under the crosshairs, and the economic crisis accelerated the forces of corporate education reform and privatization in both political parties. In the few years that followed the crash, Alabama had some of the deepest budget cuts in the nation. The legislature weakened tenure rights, restricted payroll dues deduction, created a second tier for the state pension, legalized charter schools, set up a quote-unquote failing schools list, raised benefit costs, and established a private school scholarship fund through the Alabama Accountability Act. That was all within 5 years or so of the Great Recession. Meanwhile, teachers and public sector workers in general were political punching bags, with them being blamed for society's ills and the subject of severe efforts to stoke resentment and division among the working class. And it was in this context that Huntsville City Schools was experiencing its own financial crisis. As with many school districts at the time, Huntsville was looking at a gaping hole in the budget. The district's first African-American superintendent, Dr. Anroy Moore, was facing political backlash over not just the budget, but the general direction of the district. Ultimately, the school district was subjected to a brief state intervention under Ed Richardson to supposedly clean things up, which naturally meant a reduction in force, also known as layoffs, which had a particular impact, in this case, on special education aides, the people who are some of our most vulnerable, who are helping some of our most vulnerable students. Meanwhile, the school district was still subject to a desegregation order, Hereford versus Huntsville Board of Education, that dated back to 1970, an order impacting issues including zoning lines and the construction of new schools. Now, just as privatizers targeted New Orleans public schools post-Katrina, the crisis in Huntsville made it a prime target. Enter Casey Wardenski. Despite no experience as a superintendent or even as a public school teacher, the political and business establishment in town supported Wardenski as a figure who could shake up the school district, which was perceived as overspending and inefficient. Now, if you go to his website, Wardenski brags about allegedly turning a $19 million deficit into a surplus of more than $30 million. How this was supposedly accomplished has never been fully explained and frankly deserves journalistic investigation. But Ed Richardson and the state intervention claimed they were the ones who erased that deficit, a full 3 months before Wardenski even took office. Regardless of who claims credit and how exactly those finances were improved, Wardenski undertook a spending spree on new school buildings, laptops for every student with a slew of new tech software and programs, central office bureaucracy, lawyers, and numerous contracts that funneled public dollars into private hands, all while teachers remained on the state minimum salary. Wardenski brags about reducing the number of, quote, failing schools, but he leaves out how much of that success was from simply closing, consolidating, and renaming schools across the district. Turns out that's an easy way to game the numbers. A school can't be failing if it's been closed. There have been many questions raised in the years since all of his real estate wheeling and dealing. Folks like current school board member Michelle Watkins have specifically questioned the deals involving the old Johnson and Grissom high schools, asking why the school district appeared to sell property to the city of Huntsville for millions of dollars below appraisal value. Allegedly, this was to compensate the city for new infrastructure required to go along with the new Grissom High at its new location. A new school that, by the way, was at or over capacity the day it opened. Now, why spend millions on a new school that was built to be overcrowded? Was it more handouts to contractors? Imposed limits on minority student transfers? Simple incompetence? It's hard to say, but that was par for the course for his administration. Now, most notoriously, Wardenski's administration was viciously anti-teacher and anti-employee. Wardenski imposed his vision of lean production that we've seen all across the public sector and private industry. And as an aside, Jacob interviewed one of our retirees, Joe Marshall, recently on Overtime, where he talked about redesign team concepts at the paper mill. And there are really a lot of parallels between what happened in private industry to have a leaner workforce and the type of corporate education reform we've seen from folks like Casey Wardenski. In this case, veteran teachers were chased out, and high turnover was actually seen as a positive. And it worked, too, with Wardenski's policies leading to one of the highest teacher turnover rates in the entire state of Alabama. Huntsville was a city that literally could put a man on the moon, but couldn't keep a teacher in a classroom. Employees faced both implicit and explicit threats against speaking up. Forced transfers were weaponized. The board's policy manual was completely rewritten to the benefit of management and to the detriment of employees and the public. And the entire culture of the district was reshaped by a top-down, authoritarian, and bullying management style. Huntsville City Schools became ground zero for corporate reform and privatization in Alabama. By the end of his tenure, hundreds of support staff jobs were outsourced to temp agencies, impacting security guards, custodians, cafeteria workers, special education aides, maintenance, and IT. Appleton, a for-profit vendor which has since been rebranded as Spur, took over the after-school services initially and then expanded into a variety of support services. A group called Lean Frog was brought in to do, the HR department's job, while also providing recommendations on how to have a leaner workforce. And in what became the most controversial move, the alternative school was contracted out to a private company named Pinnacle. More on that later. Wardenski's administration had horrible relations with the community and was frequently combative with the press. School board meetings became multi-hour marathons of the superintendent and his cronies doing PR, while the board members nodded along, and any members of the public who dared to ask questions or push back publicly were treated with contempt, if not security escorts. On this front, the district spent hundreds of thousands on a well-known local political consultant named David Driscoll to do additional PR on top of the multiple six-figure central office jobs already assigned to PR and community relations. Conveniently, Driscoll was also working for the campaigns of various school board members at the same time. Now, when did his contractual work for the district end and his political work for candidates begin? We'll probably never know. Some will now give credit to Wardenski for pursuing a joint consent order with the Department of Justice and federal courts to finally address that long-standing desegregation case. But that leaves out the ways his administration entered negotiations with the Justice Department and federal courts in bad faith, the times he was admonished by Judge Heikkila, and the reality that his initial zoning plan was segregationist on its face. So while it is ultimately a good thing that the school district now has a path to so-called unitary status, it could never live up to the spirit of the agreement when the school's leadership specialized in disunity and had by that point alienated numerous communities and constituencies. I would argue that the consent order was further sabotaged by the Wardenski administration's weaponization of forced employee transfers and the widespread message coming from central office that virtually any problems you could identify, like fudging the discipline numbers, was really the fault of the DOJ and the consent order. Our story, though, takes an inspirational turn whenever we look at the broad coalition of folks who fought back. Early pushback came from the predominantly black sections of North Huntsville, including ministers and elected officials like the late County Commissioner Bob Harrison. Activists such as Russell Wynn and Terry Michael and Jane Deneef fought to expose what was really happening and keep the public informed. By 2016, there was broad discontent among students, parents, educators, and neighborhoods across the city. Community meetings started popping up all over Huntsville. Parents organized groups like Huntsville United. School board meetings were packed. Through my role as a labor leader, I pursued change by whatever means were possible, because frankly, good faith negotiations weren't one of those means possible. That included everything from regular media presence, frequent records requests, a major lawsuit we filed over Wardenski's teacher evaluations and his secret notebooks of alleged ineffective educators, and of course some good old-fashioned community organizing. Here in Huntsville, in opposition to the harmful leadership of Casey Wardenski, we built a grassroots movement that united regular working-class folks across racial and neighborhood lines to challenge one of the state's most powerful superintendents, backed by virtually the entire city establishment. This movement helped elect two strong women and former educators, Pam Hill and Michelle Watkins, to the two school board seats up for election in August 2016. That includes Watkins winning in a landslide against the incumbent school board president and Wardenski ally. That also includes Hill winning against the Wardenski ally in District 5, in spite of a collaboration between Wardenski, Appleton's CEO, and local right-wing shock jock Dale Jackson to manufacture controversy at the 11th hour before the election. The victory came despite the big money behind Wardenski's allied board candidates. Some of this money coming from the very same contractors doing business with the school district. Surprise, surprise. The election of two Wardenski opponents, while not giving us a majority on the board, did represent a public repudiation of his administration and the promise of getting some real accountability and oversight after years of the school board unanimously supporting every single one of his measures. In September 2016, just a couple weeks after the election, Casey Wardenski announced a hastily assembled press conference where we were treated with a couple of bombshells. Wardenski announced he was resigning with less than 48 hours' notice, a perk, by the way, that teachers don't get to enjoy. But the real kicker was his disclosure of a romantic relationship with Karen Lee, the CEO of Pinnacle. Yes, the same company that took over the district's alternative school and was paid millions in public tax dollars. And it just so happens a large invoice from Pinnacle was slated for that week's school board meeting. Of course, I've heard plenty of rumors about just when that relationship between Lee and Wardenski began. But ultimately, the business relationship between Huntsville City Schools and Pinnacle and its conclusion ended up in the courts. Meanwhile, the pro-Wardenski majority on the school board quickly moved to restrict citizen comments and questions at board meetings in the aftermath of his scandalous exit and the people power they witnessed. That same faction would later attempt unsuccessfully to formally censure board member Pam Hill. The large-scale privatization of support services has yet to be rolled back. Wardenski's last CFO, Jason Taylor, would resign a few months later amid his own conflict of interest questions. And it was in the first budget post-Wardenski where the other shoe dropped, and we discovered yet another budget crisis. The district has since shuffled through multiple CFOs and superintendents, and it's my assessment that Huntsville City Schools has yet to recover from the damage done, especially when it comes to the working conditions of educators and the learning conditions of students. Meanwhile, Casey has gone on to have a successful career for something called Fish Strategies before his appointment by the Trump administration, and he's now successfully rebranded himself as an America First Trump acolyte, which I find personally amusing because I remember him coming in here years ago as a tough Yankee outsider who was going to tell us yokels how to shape up. Now he's apparently one of us yokels, at least among the more reactionary crowd. So that's the story of Casey Wardenski and the damage he has done to Huntsville. I remember many one-on-one conversations with the man. I remember many heated school board meetings with the man. I remember him personally telling me that support workers don't deserve due process rights. He shouldn't even have to go through a person like me, a labor organizer, to get rid of them. And now I see his appeals, his fake populist appeals to the voters of Alabama. And if you take nothing else away from this story, I want you to hear me when I say from the bottom of my heart that I believe Casey Wardenski to be anti-worker, anti-working class, anti-teacher, anti-public. The man truly has a specialty in funneling public tax dollars into private interest. If that's what you're for, then I encourage you to vote for him. But if you truly stand for the working class of Alabama and for the stewardship of our public institutions, his anti-worker sentiment alone should be enough to earn your opposition.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you for that. There's so much. I mean, there's just so much there that I think folks. Well, obviously, folks aren't. Folks aren't going to. Folks aren't going to hear that on the radio.
Yeah,
so,
that's
or on other stations,
right?
Or on other shows.
And I got to say, it was very difficult for me to come up with this as short as it was, and I know that sounded quite long-winded, probably to some of you. But it was tough for me to put it, in a more bite-sized format. As you said, there's a lot to dig in there. There's a lot of kind of skimmed over, and if there's specific questions or anything that folks are interested in, send them our way. I'd love to talk about it. But I've seen his signs start to pop up. I've seen his commercials start to pop up, and I felt it was important because I've seen the way in which wealthy, powerful interests locally have kind of rewritten history, the local history here. And unless you were one of these handful of activists like myself who were really in the trenches during this time, it's pretty easy to be misled.
Yeah.
And so I felt it was important to put this on the record.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Adam is getting lots of kudos in the chats. And Jeb said that he has no idea how deep his anti-worker sentiment went, and that ain't on his ads. So
that's true.
That's definitely true. He's not going to put that on the ad. So and Travis asked if this is an article that's going to be linked, and we're gonna put that up as an article on the site.
Yeah, we will
as well, Travis.
Appreciate the feedback as well.
Thanks for the feedback. And as always, if you want to give the show a call, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-TV8857. So we are going to take a break here in just a second, but first, let's go through really quick some local union news Last week, we told you that the Machinists Union in Decatur may not have to strike, and we were right. That's very, very good. In what then President of the Machinists Union Local Lodge 44 said was the best contract he had seen come back from negotiations, workers secured an array of gains, including a ratification bonus of $6,000, minimum and maximum wage gains. So they have a top-out rate now of $55 an hour, I believe, where it was before like $48, something like that. In each year of the 3-year contract, there are general wage increases of $4,000, 4% of 3.5%, and then 3%. In the 3 years, there is a COLA of $4,000 over the year, $1,400, and then another $1,400. There is a progression of, in the first year, $1.20 an hour, and then $1 an hour, and then $1 an hour in the third year. There's increased 401k contributions. There's improved short-term disability, with the company now paying half the premium instead of the worker. No concessions on health care. This is a really good contract, and I think by the time you add the progression, the COLA, and the general wage increases, at least for the first year, a lot of workers are looking at over a 10% raise immediately going back to work. So that's really cool. And then on top of that, they get the $6,000 ratification bonus. So really, really great job. And that's they went on strike in 2018, and that's, you know, some of the things that you get if you show the boss that you mean business. From a statement from the International Union on contract ratification, which passed overwhelmingly, ULA machinists are the hardworking men and women who ensure that America's launch capability remains second to none by not only manufacturing but launching some of the best and safest rockets in the world, said International Association of Machinists International President Robert Martinez Jr. They deserve a contract that acknowledges the decades of skill and expertise they bring to the job. I am proud to say that's what we were able to bring home to the membership by standing in solidarity and being prepared for the bargaining table. So, hats off to them. Congratulations. Really happy for y'all. And you know, look forward to continuing to work with Machinist Local 44 in the future. So we've had a great show so far. We've been talking to the local Department of Labor, Wage and Hour folks about how to get your money back if your boss is stealing from you. Absolutely destroyed Casey Wardenski. If you missed any of it, we are on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We are wherever you get your podcasts, and you can listen to the full show there or catch clips that might interest you. Just search for the Valley Labor Report. We are going to take a break really quick, and when we come back, we're talking about some conservative political folks not being very pro-worker. This is kind of a theme of the show. So stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. We have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about our work advocating for customers and join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'll tell how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
We're back.
I think that was my fault. I didn't prep that before the show like I did with the other clips and stuff. So sorry about that.
It's all good. We're back. We're back now, and everyone can hear us, hopefully.
This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, feel free to give us a call. The phone line is open. The number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. And if you listen to the program as a podcast, you can leave us a voicemail at the same number. So I am constantly being told that it's like being put in my face all the time that the Republican Party and its mouthpieces are the new representatives of the working class. One of the ways that they bolstered this reputation back in the day, back in 2020, was by attacking Bill Maher, not wrongfully, for saying he wanted a recession, right? I mean, you remember that. That was like a whole big thing, right, Adam?
Yeah, Bill Maher sucks. So,
Yeah.
like, if they want to attack him, by all means, go for it.
But that was like, maybe you didn't, maybe it didn't cross your radar because you don't listen to as much trash as I do. But it was like, I was hearing that on so many right-wing talk shows. It was like months of Bill Maher wants you to be poor, months of it, which is true and which is bad. He said something basically to the effect of like, I hope we get a recession so that we can vote Trump out of office, which is
wow.
Yeah, that was really bad. That was really bad, and
hot take. That sucks.
Yeah.
So does he for saying
Screw
that.
Bill Maher. But here's some interesting Here's an interesting juxtaposition. I'll just let folks listen to it without a preface. Adam, let's play that Charlie Kirk clip.
Yes, I do believe that we are heading towards a recession. I don't want that. I pray that does not happen. I pray for all of you that will be losing your jobs. So what you're going to see is that these companies that have just hired dramatically are then going to have to scale down. For those of you that are employers and have to deal with kind of the smug, snarky attitude of people that are showing up late and you're like, I got no leverage because I can't find anyone to work. The only benefit of a recession, which is hard to even believe there would be one, the only benefit is that employers are now going to kind of get some of their leverage back because everyone's going to be begging for a job soon. Everyone. So you go from like, where are all the workers because they have all the leverage, to the workers will be pounding down your door for a job. Charlie Kirk, we'll be right back.
I mean, Jesus Christ, man. That's this is the guy, right, that is a working class hero. And at least, I mean, this is not like a defense of Bill Maher, but at least in Bill Maher's case, the working people being hurt is the downside of the recession, right? like in Bill Maher's fantasy, like there's a recession and then Trump gets kicked out of office, but it's bad that poor people have to be hurt in the meantime, right? We can at least say that, or we can at least say that he doesn't care. It is neither bad nor good. It's just something that has to happen to get Trump out of office, okay? But for Charlie Kirk, you listener with a job being broken down to the point where you have to crawl on your knees back to your job, pounding down the door, that's the good thing for him. That's the benefit of a recession for this guy.
It's very revealing of who they identify with and who they don't. And yeah, if you're listening to that and you're someone who actually works for a living, you actually have to work for someone else, as the vast majority of us do. Obviously, they're not speaking to us. They don't want our support. It's very obvious.
I mean, that's serious. Like, seriously, folks. Like, listening to this, I know that just by the numbers, the majority of people that listen to this show, even if you're conservative, like, you work. You know, you're not, you're just by virtue of the way that our society is structured, you're not an owner listening to this, probably. Probably you, listener, are not an owner. You are not a boss. You are a worker. The benefit to Charlie Kirk, in his mind, the benefit of a recession is that your life is made worse to give more leverage to the boss. That's the benefit. That's the thing that he thinks is redeemable about a recession. But, in his defense, he will pray for you.
That's true.
So.
They are obsessed with making it easier to fire people.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's a common theme throughout today's show as well. I mean, that was obviously a common theme within Casey Wardenski and his regime in Huntsville City. You see it with these comments being made by Charlie Kirk and also by, most of right-wing media when they talk this way. A lot of it boils down to more power for your boss, less power for you, more power for that boss to be able to fire you. And, not that we need reminding, but we've got to sell our labor in order to eat in this country. We don't have a guaranteed income. We don't have a guaranteed job. I know we have right to work laws, but that doesn't mean you actually have a right to work. So making it easier to fire you means making it easier to put you and your entire household in turmoil and possibly catastrophe.
And the fetishization of business owners is nonsense. Because the idea that they put forward is that, they take risks. They take risks. What is the risk? I want you to actually legitimately think about, what is the risk for a business owner if his business falls through? What is the risk? Because the way that our society is structured, if you create a corporation, you're not liable personally for the debts. So if something happens and your business doesn't do well, you're not going to be personally liable for any debts that your business takes on. what happens if your business falls through? Oh, you either get to sit on all of the money that you have previously stolen from workers who made the business run to the extent that it did, or you have to become a worker. That is the risk that bosses take.
And that's assuming you're not just straight up bailed out with, low interest or zero interest loans, which has honestly been a common practice here in this country for quite some time now. And I get there may be someone listening who has small business background, maybe you've owned a small business before. Well, guess what? They're not for you either.
Right.
These rules are not made for your benefit. I think I think you're onto something there. The whole risk that's taken.
Yeah.
Think about the risk that we all take every day when we go to work.
Yeah. Yeah, the entirety of the risk that comes to a boss by virtue of creating a business is that one day they might have to be a worker. That is the worst outcome that can befall a boss. As a matter of fact, the worst thing that can happen to them is that they have to sell their labor.
Like the rest of us.
Like the rest of us. Like the rest of us. So last week was replete with examples of folks who want to fashion themselves as warriors for the working class, letting the mask slip. Another example was Lindsey Graham.
God.
Last week, the U.S. Senate Budget Committee held a hearing on Amazon's violation of labor law, and the purpose was basically to establish a basis for the necessity of a law that would prohibit union busters from accessing federal dollars. Here is how warrior for the working class Republican Lindsey Graham began his remarks after an introduction from Bernie Sanders.
In my view, however, the time for talk is over. The time for action is now. Taxpayer dollars should not go to companies like Amazon who repeatedly break the law. And we're talking about billions and billions of dollars in contracts. No government, not the federal government, not the state government, and not any city government should be handing out corporate welfare to union busters and labor law violators. Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really enjoyed working with you, but wow. This committee is taking a very dangerous turn under your leadership, to be honest with you.
Dangerous. It's taking a dangerous turn. How is it? I mean, could you imagine the idea that Bernie has just said he doesn't think that employers who violate labor law should be rewarded with billions of dollars in taxpayer money. And Lindsey Graham says that's dangerous. Law and Order Lindsey Graham says it is dangerous to enforce the law if the law would hurt bosses. If the law would benefit workers, maybe we need to be a little bit more liberal, loosey-goosey with enforcement. And, do we really have to enforce the law? Do we really need people to encourage people to follow the law? Maybe not. It's dangerous. That's what he says. He says it's dangerous to encourage employers to follow the law. He then went on to say that, look, there's a process here if you have issues. Adam, let's play that.
Wait, as to the process, there's a process in this country. If you feel like the law has been violated in your efforts to unionize the workforce, you can file a complaint. People will have a hearing. There's a process to debar companies who engage in illegal behavior. There is a process. This is a political process here.
This is a political process. He says that derisively. This U.S. Senate Budget Committee hearing, this is a political process. Yes, it's a political process. That's what you are a politician. You are a practitioner of politics. What is politics? It is the decision-making of how we are to run our society. Yes, this is politics. This is politics. And it's just amazing because you'll remember that Tuberville said something similar to this a few months ago at the mine workers hearing. Like, deriding deriding the idea of doing politics. Just deriding the idea because they think that politics is just lying about gay folks and trans folks. That's the idea. And Graham ended his remarks by veering into he's not super close to it, but he dips his toes in the water in the well that he's been going back to so often that earned him so much credit from the Kavanaugh hearings, where he became a mini celebrity on the right wing for yelling at people. And he dipped his toes back into that well, raging at the behest of the poor executives at Amazon. The poor executives. And saying what they would do if they got the committee back.
This is very dangerous. You can have oversight hearings all you like, but you've determined Amazon is a piece of crap company. That's your political bias. They're subject to the laws of the United States. They shouldn't be subject to this. If we get the committee back, we're not going to do this.
So there you go.
And I believe him. If or probably when they get the committee back, no, they will not do any oversight of corporate America. So in that case, he's actually telling the truth for a change.
Yep. So that's Republicans will not be shining a light on employer misconduct. Chris Smalls, the president of the Amazon Labor Union, has his remarks immediately after Lindsey Graham, and he absolutely schools him. Let's play that.
Thank you for having me. Well, first off, I want to address Mr. Graham. First off, it sounded like you was talking about more of the companies and the businesses in your speech, but you forgot that the people are the ones who make these companies operate. And if we're not protected, and if the process for when we hold these companies accountable is not working for us, then that's the reason why we're here today. That's the reason why I'm here to represent the workers who make these companies go. And I think that it's in your best interest to realize that it's not a left or a right thing. It's not a Democrat or a Republican thing. It's a workers thing. It's a workers issue. And we're the ones that are suffering in the corporations that you're talking about, in the businesses that you're talking about, in the warehouses that you're talking about. So that's the reason why I think I was invited today to speak on that behalf. And you should listen, because we do represent your constituents as well. So just take that into consideration, that the people are the ones that make these corporations go. It's not the other way around. So
yeah, that's exactly right. He further details how Graham's idolization of the process that exists is utterly insufficient. We're not going to play that clip now because we're running out of time. Maybe we'll insert it in the YouTube. But he details extensively places where Amazon has violated the law, and 2 years, 3 years later, there is still no resolution. There is still no resolution. The process that is set out for workers to remedy violations of the law by their bosses is utterly insufficient. And people like Lindsey Graham think that's okay. People like Lindsey Graham think that, in fact, the law is too much on the side of the workers, which is absurd. Absolutely absurd. Not to be outdone by Lindsey Graham, though, Democrat Tim Kaine had to come in and white knight for Amazon against the scary workers, too.
Thank you, Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of you. Very, very interesting testimony. I said at a hearing, Mr. Chair, I think about 2 weeks ago here, that maybe I'm not fit for this line of work because I was born with a paint box that has no broad brushes in it. And so, I mean, I'll start with you, Mr. President. I don't challenge some of the facts that my chairman laid out or that you've laid out. And I think some compelling stories, but I don't think Amazon is an organized criminal syndicate.
It definitely is the way they treat their workers, sir, with all due respect.
Yeah, so I mean, I know that that's your opinion, and you are as sincere in stating that as I am in saying that I think that's a vast overstatement. Amazon employs 1 million Americans. Not everybody hates their jobs at Amazon. Tens of thousands of them work in Virginia. Not everybody hates their jobs at Amazon. Amazon's going to open a huge headquarters in Northern Virginia that was going to have 25,000 employees, but after New York said, we don't want you, it's going to be 35,000 employees in Northern Virginia, and Virginians are very excited about it. It's in probably the bluest part of Virginia. And
I'm going to stop Tim Kaine right there since we're running out of time, and I wanted to make sure we have time to do a couple plugs here at the end. But definitely stay tuned for overtime. We're going to dive in a little bit more there about that congressional hearing. And while we're wrapping up here on the radio, one plug I did want to give, there is going to be a rally and march, a fight for human rights, bans off our bodies on May 21st. That's Saturday, May 21st, 1 p.m. in Huntsville at Big Spring Park.
Great. Yeah, also early bird registration deadline for Labor Notes conference is passed, but you can still go. The conference is June 17 and 19. Leave us a voicemail. You can buy our hat or give us some money on our website, tvlr.fm. See you next week. All right. Yeah, so folks, we're off the radio now. And Yaffe, I think you're probably listening to us. Give us just a second to wrap this up. But yeah, that we talked about this on Left Reckoning yesterday, which the recording is going to be played tomorrow. But what value did Tim Kaine's saying that bring? I mean, even if you're just thinking politically, like, why would you do that?
Well, it made the lobbyist happy, I'm sure, and I'm presuming it kept his. You know, we cut it off there right as he was explaining that Amazon was relocating to Northern Virginia, and you know that's something we recognize quite well here in Alabama, where political leadership just begs and gets on their hands and knees, really. To beg corporations to relocate to the state, and they throw out every subsidy known to man to get them to come here. And then here, you know, I guess you're going to go in front of Congress, in front of the world, to take up for them. As you've just listened to testimony from their own workers on how the working conditions really are, and how the company, despite getting all these federal dollars in these contracts, continues to flagrantly ignore the law.
It's just silly. Like the tone policing. He took issue with the president, the international president of the Teamsters, saying that they're an organized criminal syndicate. Which, like, I don't care. I mean, I think I think the definition matches if we're going to say an organized criminal syndicate. What is that? An organized criminal syndicate would be something that does crime in an organized way as a business model. And that's how they do their business model, is they break labor law, they break OSHA standards as a business model. They pay people millions of dollars, thousands of dollars an hour to break the law.
Right.
I mean, I don't care if you use the word organized crime syndicate, but good grief, tone policing workers who are telling you their experiences and telling you the facts that he doesn't even dispute about the way that Amazon conducts their business is just silly. It is politically impotent.
And that was the Democrats' running mate in 2016.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, like,
as someone in our comments said, it shows how much of a corporate Democrat he really is. I mean, not that we needed any more evidence, but it's there. And someone else mentioned how sparsely attended that hearing was, and I agree. There there was just a handful of senators that even showed up to this.
Right.
And then you've got one of them is Lindsey Graham whining and crying, and then you got Tim Kaine up there trying to do this centrist, both sides kind of thing and take up for management, take up for Amazon. Yeah, it's pretty disgusting. And, I'm thankful that Senator Sanders is the chair of that committee and is at least able to do things like this. But he obviously doesn't have a lot of help.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair to Tim, the rest of everything outside of that clip is actually pretty good. He does really good messaging on the PRO Act. He attacks some right-wing characterizations of the PRO Act. He explains why he supports the PRO Act. He explains why people should unionize and whatever. So the rest of it is good. But like, why would you preface a decent performance with that nonsense?
Well, I think that's where he was speaking from the heart before he switched gears and went back into their standard talking points where he knows he's supposed to throw us a bone rhetorically.
Right. Yeah, well. All right. So here's what we've got in store. We're off the radio now. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for staying with us. I appreciate it. We've got a great overtime lined up for you. You can still call in, 844-899-TVLR. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. We're going to be talking to Yaffe about inflation. We're going to be talking about some updates on the coal miners' strike. We're going to be talking about Starbucks breaking the law and some more. We'll be taking your comments as well. So stay tuned, and we will be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. This is Alabama's only union talk radio show. We are now in overtime. We've got some good stuff. We've got good news finally on the Warrior Met coal strike. Really excited about that. Genuinely some of the most constructive and material news probably since the beginning of the strike, actually. Honestly, probably since the beginning of the strike, we've heard the best news in the last week. So really excited about that. And we've also got Yaffe. Yaffe is back. Yaffe's back on the program. So let's go ahead and get started. Yaffe, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
I'm not hearing him, Adam. Can you make sure that do the turn monitor off and then on again, maybe, on the Zoom.
Gotcha.
That's what I did to the other thing.
I can hear you guys.
Hey,
can you hear me?
there you are. I hear you.
We're in business now.
Yeah, we're in business now.
All right.
Yeah, we're not, not professionals, so occasionally we'll have some technical difficulties. We appreciate your time, though. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Yep. Yeah, so before we get into the thing, I wanted to talk to you about inflation because you said some stuff about inflation that I wanted to get some clarification on your program. But before we get to that, can you tell us, this is your third time on the show now. Third time on the show. Have I ever bitten you or injured you in any way?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't. I didn't think so either. I feel like I engage in a respectful way. Wouldn't you think that, generally speaking? I mean, I think I can make jokes and stuff, but I think I'm generally pretty easy to talk to.
Yeah. On the show. you can be vicious on Twitter, but that's normal.
That is very true. This is Adam chiming in to say yes. I observed that as well. But yeah, on the show, I will say that we always try to have constructive dialogue with people. We've had people that disagree with us, and we try to model good conversations, good dialogue. And Yaffe, I will say that every time you've been on this program, as much as we may disagree, you've always been very respectful and cool to talk to. And so, I mean, I think that's a good thing that we're able to have respectful dialogue across pretty extreme political differences.
Yeah.
I do think, in my defense on Twitter, I think most of the time it's a pretty tongue-in-cheek. I don't think I would give off the air that I'm genuinely being hateful unless something really pisses me off.
Well, most people on Twitter are pretty mean, so
and you match the medium, right? You match the medium. Everybody.
I was about to say, when in Rome, you know.
Yeah, when in Rome, right. Yeah, and so one time I actually tweeted something that was totally a joke. I said something about, I was in somebody's article, and I won't name them because I don't want to embarrass them, but I was in somebody's article, and there were a bunch of other people in this person's article, and they tagged them on Twitter, but they didn't tag me, and it was just because, like, they ran out of room. Like, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. But I replied, and I said, like, censored again or something like that, And this dude calls me, and he's like, "Why are you trying to cause trouble for me, man? That's my employer that you're tweeting at right there." And I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, calm down. It's a tweet. Like, chill out. So I think people can take Twitter a bit too seriously. But yeah, so I asked that because I have asked Phil Williams to come on the show. And he has engaged with me on Twitter. But he's not replying to any of my emails. And same thing with Brian Dawson from 1819 News, because I was interested in talking to Brian Dawson from 1819 News because he gave a total fluff interview to Dean Odle, the flat earth pro-military coup gubernatorial candidate, and like talked to him like he was a real like a like a real viable candidate who had real ideas and stuff like that, and wasn't just a kook. Which, to the credit of the people on WVNN, at least y'all just like laughed him off the radio if you had him on at all. But
Dale had him on, and Dean
that.
Odom will not come on again.
That's appropriate. Like, that's what you do when a flat earther runs for governor. I think if you platform them at all, you just laugh at them. But they had this guy on, and they didn't even mention that he thinks we need a military coup. Which is on his campaign website. He said that on his campaign website for governor of Alabama, he's like, the only way that we can get a free society again is for the military to take over and to like execute Joe Biden or something. And he also
I did not know that. I'll have to go look at that.
Yes, it's crazy. And that he's flat. His flat Earth stuff is all out there. They didn't mention any of that stuff. Like, they just talked to him about like normal things. Like, this is a normal person. And so I wanted to talk to him about that because 1819 News, they want to kind of portray themselves as like, oh, we just give you the straight dope, and that was pretty interesting to me. So, all right, well, I appreciate the vote of confidence. The inflation stuff, you said, can you just explain to me why you think we have inflation right now?
Well, it's a multifaceted thing. Obviously, the Federal Reserve has kept interest rates artificially low for a long time. And so that's going to increase the money supply. They have increased the money supply. But there is no doubt in the past 2 years under COVID, under Republicans and Democrats, they have completely blown out the spending. While at the same time, there has been supply chain issues and less productivity in the market. So you have just throwing a bunch of cash everywhere. People have too much cash, but on the supply side is less. And you also have deficits, the debt, and the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates artificially low for so long. It was a recipe for the kind of inflation we're seeing. And they said a lot of it was transitory because they thought it was solely just supply chain issues, which ended up being wrong. I think a lot of this was entirely predictable.
Mm-hmm. And so what is the prescription to address that?
Well, the Federal Reserve did raise interest rates. They're going to have to do that. So that is part of it. It's not going to be a one-time solution. I have been arguing for a supply side solution as well, where we deregulate, add some deregulation, possible tax rate cuts, and opening the energy sector so we can get, we want a strong dollar. So the Federal Reserve is going to try to do that, hopefully. I don't know if they're going to be strong enough. That's part of it. We also need spending cuts, control of spending in D.C. That's going to be part of it. But we also need to get the supply side moving, and anything we can do to encourage more productivity on the supply side so they can actually keep up with the demand, since there's higher demand, I think will help as well.
Yeah, so let the deregulation, tax cuts, and then there was a third thing?
Cutting spending, strong
cutting
dollar.
Spending.
Yeah.
So the deregulation, how would, what are the regulations that are standing in the way of producers right now, you think?
Well, when you talk about the energy market, there is definitely some regulations standing in the way, preventing, and this is something that they wanted because they wanted to switch us to more green energy. So they have talked about they don't want to open up as many leases before. They don't want to have the Keystone XL pipeline. They don't want, and a lot of these things are done on the state level. There's other pipelines in state levels that have been blocked. Things have been held up in court. Anyway, we can kind of increase the productivity there so we can produce more energy here at home, I think will help. In terms of farming, I know there are some sugar regulations that encourage less producing of sugar. A lot of this is left over from the Great Depression because they wanted to keep prices high for sugar. Well, we need to find out ways to deregulate that so we can get more I mean, right now, if we're going to have a food shortage, we need to figure out what regulations could get in the way of farmers producing more food. Those are just a couple examples, I think.
But I think generally you kind of like gestured to different areas of the economy and said we need to deregulate. But I'm not sure that, and just say it again if I missed it. But I'm not sure that I actually heard like a thing, like an actual thing that is standing in the way of producers producing.
Well, in terms of we need to open up leases on energy production. Yes.
We need to open up leases on energy production, and that's
that's
the regulation that you think that we need.
One of them, and we need to approve. We definitely need to approve the Keystone XL pipeline, I think.
Jacob, I don't want to steal your thunder here, but I'm just going to say that I'm not sure how any of that necessarily means lower prices. If inflation is about the rise of prices, I don't see how any of that addresses the fact that ultimately companies can charge whatever they want as far as the market will bear. And given that we're so dependent on oil as one example, but also the meat industry and other industries where we've seen record profits, we've seen where they are price gouging. And ultimately, I'm not seeing, and even from Democrats as well, I'm not seeing any proposals that actually addresses rising prices, because changing the interest rates doesn't necessarily do that. It does historically cause recessions. Deregulation, we could, sure. I mean, I think there's opportunities to open up more oil extraction. Of course, that brings us closer to the apocalypse. But even separate from that, it does take time for that supply to actually hit the marketplace. But it still doesn't. There's no price controls. There's no alternatives to the consumption, right? So, I mean, if we're basically backs against the wall, the prices of essential goods and services continue to skyrocket quicker than wages. But we don't have the alternative of consuming less necessarily, or consuming different alternatives. We don't have anything that's proposing price controls. We are still unable to actually address some of the supply chain issues that are coming from COVID, because China has determined they don't want to see 1 million of their people die from this virus, and so they are taking some pretty extreme measures. We could argue about whether it's worth it or not, but regardless, their supply chain issues as a result of COVID and COVID measures. So all these things are factoring together, but at the end of the day, we can hear in these board of director meetings that these companies recognize they can raise their prices, they can charge us more, and there's really nothing we can do about it. And giving them more money through tax cuts or deregulations, I don't see how that gives them any incentive to tamp down on runaway price inflation. In fact, I think it would probably do the opposite. So what I'm hearing, just as a regular, not an economist, just a rank and file Alabama worker, I'm not hearing anyone in the political establishment tell me anything that's actually going to address inflation in terms of me paying more at the gas pump and me paying more at the grocery store. I'm not hearing it. And what I'm seeing, though, from what you just mentioned is basically more of the same Reaganomics that we've been doing for 40 years. And what I'm hearing from the Fed is, we're going to restrict the money supply by raising interest rates, which, like 7 out of 8 times it did cause a recession, but just trust us, this time we've got it under control. And I've seen a lot of blame on wages. I've seen labor being blamed as if we're somehow part of the cause here, even though the wage increases that we're seeing across the board are not even keeping up with inflation. So I don't know. I'm not an economist, as I said, so some of this is frankly over my head. But I'm still not hearing anything from anybody that explains to me how prices are going to be reined in, how we will rein in the power of corporate America to charge us whatever the hell they want. And I don't think even more fossil fuel extraction, destroying our natural habitat, ruining our national parks and federal lands, to pump more carbon in our atmosphere that brings us closer to literal civilization extinction level events. None of this seems like the answer to me. But that's my soapbox, and I'll get off of it and turn it back over to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, what do you what is, because I think that's a lot of, because I don't know, I have some kind of general ideas, but I'm not the inflation thing is a bit over my head as well, but that is kind of the general critique that I have, because it seems to me that the idea coming from the right is that inflation is is caused by too much money chasing too few goods, and tax cuts are a stimulative policy, right? They're a stimulative policy. They don't stimulate very much, but it is a stimulative policy. Deregulation is, it seems to me that the idea of deregulation is that you free up more resources for them to produce more, but they have so much in profits that I'm not understanding how
they're incentivized to produce more?
A 1% cost decrease because of a deregulation, a decrease in regulations is going to actually increase their production, and so it's difficult for me to kind of wrap my head around.
Yeah, well, I mean, economics is always based on incentives, and when by freeing up, I think the supply side, like I said, especially with deregulation, it adds those incentives to produce more, I think. And you're saying, well, they're not going to really want to produce more because they're already having record profits, so they're just gouging customers. Not really sure I buy that, but anytime you free up the private sector, you can talk about the big corporations. They're the ones, yeah, you're right, that they are not hurt as much by inflation. But when you free up the entire private sector, you can add more competition. And it's really competition, small businesses, other producers out there that are going to help them more accountable, make them more accountable. And anything we can do to increase not only competition, but just incentives, because it is their business to want to sell goods and services. And eventually, they're not going to be able to just keep having high prices. The market's going to change. So they're not just thinking about now, but they're also going to think about the future. And I don't think it's in their future economic interest to just keep prices high and price a lot of people out of the market. They're going to want to find ways to get more of their product to customers. And I think anything we can do on the regulation side to help speed up that process, I think is a good thing based on incentives. Any ways we can incentivize them to do that is a good thing. And I'm not really a big fan of going down the price control route because that seems to have perverse incentives, I think. And especially...
No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead. That was basically my main point.
Jacob, real quick, I just wanted to say something that I heard that I think we probably agree on is the monopoly. Because Yaffe, I agree with you that the large private sector industries, your Amazons, your Walmarts, BP Oil, these companies are not facing the same kind of economy that small to mid-sized businesses face. So while we disagree on much there is something to that. And I think that's where, I'm coming from and is that part of the reason we have an inflation crisis right now, it's not so much about, government spending, our regulations, it's about the growth of monopoly power, where so much of our economy is concentrated into just a handful of corporations. When you have Tyson dominating the meat industry and you have Amazon and Walmart dominating their industries, they have a power that is unchecked. And, so I know price controls is something that's been done in the past. I agree that it has its downfalls, because ultimately you can start to see capital go on strike. Capital has its own class consciousness, oftentimes more so than us working class people, and they're certainly willing to organize and refuse to invest. Hell, the last few decades, there's been a lot of that where money is not being reinvested into production. It's just going into fake economies, whether that's stock market
Crypto,
speculation, crypto, NFTs, Silicon Valley companies that really never profit but somehow have, massive stock volumes. So, again, the monopoly power is a key here when we're talking about inflation. And the Fed is not up to the task of checking monopoly power. I would argue that the Reaganomics that you're discussing is not up to the task of dealing with monopoly power. If anything, I think that led us to where we're at with that. That's what I'm thinking.
On the oil stuff, aren't there? And I know that there's a conservative rebuttal, and you're not to this, and you're not supposed to ask questions you don't know the answer to. But I can't recall it. I recall not being satisfied. But isn't there something like 9,000 oil leases that are not being used right now, and oil companies are seeing record profit? Why is there not an incentive to use the leases that they have right now, or to increase production in the places that they're already at, as opposed to just giving shareholders more money?
Yeah, and that was something that the Biden administration had said. There are some leases right now. Now, I will say some of those leases had been held up in court for environmental reasons, which is a whole nother subject. But in terms of, there are some that they are using. But if there is an incentive in the future that there's going to be more regulation down the road to prevent them from exploring those, they're not going to invest the money in that. So there has to be a complete economic policy in terms of, we're going to allow you to explore as much as possible. And they're going to want to invest their money to do that. Now, you're right, there was another reason for that, and I can't recall it either specifically on the oil leases, but it had something to do with, I believe it had something to do with it being held up in certain other areas.
It just seems to me. It just seems to me that.
Basically, what you're saying is that the oil companies are loving this. They're price gouging. They don't want to explore
there's
more.
one. ConocoPhillips had a profit increase of 1,400%, 1,400%. So they could, with that much increased profits, they could have gas maybe 5 cents a gallon less than all their other competitors, and it seems like that would be an incentive that would be there, but instead they just have those profits instead.
Well, and I'm sorry, but as someone who is aware that climate change is putting us down a path of existential threat, I don't think we need to do anything to incentivize more drilling and more extraction, because that means more death and more chaos. And I know that's not a popular thing to say, because right now we're all feeling the pinch at the gas pump. But in my view, I don't see why the oil industry even has a right to exist. It is a national security threat. What they are doing, the carbon that is being pumped into our atmosphere, is a security threat, not just for the United States of America, but for literally every human on this planet, all living species on this planet. The science is very, very clear about that. So, while price controls, maybe that's not the most ideal option, but hell, what if we actually nationalized the energy sector so that we could do what we have to do in this transitional phase to make sure folks have the fuel they need for the economy to be going in the right direction. But we absolutely do need green energy, not now, like years ago, like yesterday. And so, I know we're getting kind of deep on the oil factor, because it's not just oil. Prices are rising everywhere, and it's not just due to fossil fuel cost. I mean, the meat industry is a great example where monopoly power has an ability to, jack up the prices, and what are we going to do about it? So that's really what bothers me, is I don't see any program from any direction really that is explaining how we rein in these prices. And this is where we're going to disagree. I just am never going to accept that more drilling and more destruction of our environment for the temporary, use of fossil fuels is going to be worth it in the long run. Because I feel like our grandchildren and their children are going to look back and wonder what in the hell we were doing.
One thing I will say is it does seem like you admit that there are incentives out there to prevent more fossil fuel exploration.
Not enough, frankly.
Yeah, I think he was just saying his opinion. I think that, I don't think that there's ever been an actual taking back of the ability once it's given. I mean, I don't think that anybody has ever pointed to any well that Biden has shut down or any lease that Biden has shut down. I mean, everything that was open under the Trump administration is open now, or can be open now. And there's some production that just simply isn't happening right now. We still don't have the production levels, not because there are new regulations, but because they're just choosing not to produce, even in America. I mean, is it right? Isn't that right? Like, are there places that were pumping oil under the Trump administration that aren't anymore?
Well, when you talk about supply and demand, and I have to admit, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there were, when you talk about future leases, those were shut down. And you're right, some of that is because during COVID, there was such a glut, it was the opposite. There was so much supply because everyone was at home that, they didn't have to do it. So they're going to have to catch up. And I think they will catch up in some ways. But when you have an administration that immediately when they get there and they say, we're not going to offer any new leases, we're going to have a moratorium on those kind of leases, we're going to have a moratorium on pipelines, we're going to have a moratorium on whatever, they're going to be reluctant to invest in any kind of new exploration because they kind of see the writing on the wall. And in that way, it kind of disincentivizes them to say, okay, we're just going to take our profits and right now and just raise prices. And I would rather have some kind of incentive that at least gets some of them to say, okay, we need to look at this future exploration because we need to get the supply up, because that's the main way you lower prices is you have more and more supply. And
but, I mean, that's like a long-term fix, and if because that's not gonna, there's nothing that's gonna fix the thing short term. And so if you're talking long-term solutions, I'm talking long-term solutions. I think both of us are amicable to like nuclear energy. Why would we not be doing something like that, which is going to be less of a or not a driver of climate change, and actually provides cheaper electricity than gas or oil? Like, why is it that we want to incentivize more exploration instead of incentivizing more nuclear energy or wind and solar?
Well, if you want to talk about nuclear energy, I'm with you 100%. I mean, if we can find ways to incentivize more nuclear energy, because you're right, there are zero emissions with that. I mean, you want to talk about clean energy, you could have possibly other ramifications in terms of nuclear waste that we could talk about. I think a lot of that, the dangers of that has been exaggerated. I think a lot of the so-called dangers of a meltdown have really been exaggerated. It can be made in a much safer way. I would have loved for us to go towards more nuclear energy. And if that's part of the policy prescription, I'm on board. But I haven't seen that either. And in terms of short-term and long-term, a lot of times when you immediately open up supply, yes, it's a long-term thing, but it's also short-term. It's also going to be priced in now, because when you look at prices, they're going to see future supply coming on, and that's going to be put in their decision when it's traded on the open market.
Well, I'm going to throw something out here that we've not addressed, which is foreign policy, which plays a big role here. We have countries such as Venezuela and Iran that are oil-producing countries, which have been subject to very harsh sanctions regimes. Those could be negotiated out, right? Those could be ended. Those could be new producers available for the marketplace. We had an Iran nuclear deal that was ripped up by the previous president, and Venezuela, I've heard some, talk that maybe there's going to be some thawing of relations with Venezuela due to this energy crisis. And the other piece of it, of course, is we have a proxy war with Russia happening in Europe, and that's obviously having a major impact on prices across the board, but specifically with oil and gas. And there's nothing, it's not like written in the Bible that we have to have these sanctions.
Right.
It's not, it's very possible that the United States, as the largest economy, as the most powerful country on earth, the most wealthy country on earth, could actually use its power and influence to try to negotiate peace and diplomacy. But it appears that that's not really on the table. And I think that's a failure of the White House and a failure of NATO. Of course, that's not to deflect blame from Putin and the Russian invasion. They have committed an illegal invasion, an illegal war. And so it's not that, we should be okay with that. But the United States response to try to strangle Russia and the Russian economy absolutely is having an impact on inflation and on the fuel supply. And the United States response to funnel tens of billions of dollars in weapons that are going to be largely unaccounted for over into Eastern Europe really is poised to prolong this conflict. And it's a shame. It's a shame because when we have wars like this, it's ordinary, regular people, men, women, and children who bear the brunt of it, while politicians and generals can comfortably make these decisions, and while the military-industrial complex can profit in an obscene manner off this death and destruction. So, that's kind of the elephant in the room, I think, is that there's a foreign policy regime here of American imperialism which is undergirding all of this.
Well, when you talk about, there are many different aspects. If we open up to Iran, what does that mean for Iran's military power? That's what they're going to use the money for. But also, they're in direct
they'll never
competition
have
with
the
Saudi.
military we have.
True.
I'm not
But they can
personally, if
still cause
Iran
a lot of
spends more
damage.
on the military, that doesn't bother me. They have a right to have a military to the extent that any government has the right to exist. Why wouldn't they spend money on their military given the way they've been treated? We overthrew their government in 1953, a democratic government. The CIA and MI6 came in. They overthrew that government and installed a dictator who reigned with a bloody fist for over 2 decades there, with secret police trained by the CIA. And it's no surprise that ultimately it backfired in our face with the Islamic Revolution in '79. But in all these situations where we name these countries that are supposedly bad guys, that are supposed to be our enemies, it's worth digging deeper to see, well, why do they have a problem with America? Is it just because they don't like the way we talk, they don't like the way we look, they don't like our flags and our freedom, and that's the surface level sort of response we have? But then you dig a little deeper and realize, you know what? If someone overthrew my government, I'd feel some type of way about that. That's just me. But so I'm not personally, and I'm sorry to cut you off. I just get really fired up about this in particular, because I don't have a problem with the Iranian people, and the Iranian government sucks, as do most governments, and it has its blood on its hands. But Iran is an oil-producing country. There's nothing that, on a practical matter, stops us as a country from negotiating with Iran to end these sanctions, to bring them back into the marketplace, beyond our fears that, yes, their power and influence would grow in the Middle East. And, that's something that evidently the United States is unwilling to do, is unwilling to see any sort of alternatives or any other powers grow around the world, even halfway across the world.
Yeah, and you could talk about our dependence on foreign oil in general. You could talk about foreign policy. You could talk about, the Russian war has definitely caused an increase of prices. And, if we just don't give the Ukrainians a military aid, well, then basically there's a chance that the Russians are just going to win. And are we willing to accept something like that in Europe? That is all a deep discussion we could definitely have. But overall, I think then if we're talking once again about finding ways to increase supply, I think the better solution would be find ways to increase energy supply here. And I will say Jacob made a good point that, it should not just be focused on oil. It should be focused on natural gas. It should be focused on nuclear energy. But there are times where there are strict environmentalist groups who fight very hard against both natural gas and nuclear energy, which have far fewer carbon emissions than coal and oil. So I would much rather open it up as much as we can here in the U.S. so we're not having to be dependent on supplies from foreign countries.
Yeah,
it's oil's always traded on a world market. So I'm not one who likes to use the word energy independent, because the fact is the world market will affect it. But if we can have supply here and increase supply here in different areas, that's going to have a much more impact on the world market than if we free it up in other countries, I think.
But I think in the immediate term, wouldn't the as far as everything that you're talking about, the quickest thing would be to remove sanctions on Venezuela and Iran and begin importing their oil, wouldn't it?
Well, I will say I'm not sure about that, just because Iran is enemies with Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is still a major importer of ours. So if we start getting it from Iran, there's a chance Saudi Arabia is going to be very pissed off. And it's these kind of things where that's why it becomes very, very dangerous, where I agree with you guys that being dependent on these foreign countries and foreign policy gets very complicated. And so you could release sanctions on Iran, get it from Venezuela, but that causes other problems from other countries where we get other goods. So,
and that's fair. That's definitely fair.
And I think I think that France has a really good energy. They're almost 100% of their energy is from nuclear, isn't it?
Yeah, and I agree with that completely. I think we have really dropped the ball, because the amount of energy we could get cheaply and cleanly from nuclear energy far surpasses any other kind of energy. And I would be all in favor of that for many different reasons.
Yeah, I think that would be the, I think that there are some drawbacks, but I think I think I've been more or less convinced that nuclear can be built safely at this point, if it's done either with an extreme amount of government oversight or by the government. I don't know that I would trust a company to do it, but
well, there would definitely need to be some regulations involved, and I think there already are. but the regulations have gone so to the point, a lot of it's on the local level where people have just been scared to death for different reasons of nuclear energy, that anytime it's brought up, it's just, people are scared of it.
Yeah. So I think my prescription to attack inflation would be to pull money out of the money supply by taxing rich people, and giving the money back to working people, and increasing investment in nuclear energy and removing sanctions. I think that's what we've agreed on. Is that right? Yeah.
Nice try. That's good.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, this wasn't, and I have much less firm opinions on inflation and what to do about it. So that's why I was spending a lot of time listening, as opposed to normally where I have very strong opinions about things. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for inviting me, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Yeah. So like I opened up overtime with, we had some good news come out for the first time in like a year. And I mean, the whole strike, I think this is genuinely the most material news that we've seen. And that is the statement from BlackRock, which is the primary investor in Warrior Met Coal, saying that they believe that the strike should end, which is a big deal. You get the the CEO of BlackRock coming down and start putting some pressure on Warrior Met. You're gonna have some serious stuff like that. That's some serious pressure, and that I think as much as anything else, this is hopefully the beginning of the end for the strike. They said in their statement that prolonged operational disruptions, such as labor disputes, can have a negative impact on a company's financial performance and business resilience. We believe it is in the best economic interest of our clients for Warrior Met Coal and the UMWA to reach a resolution. Not only that, though, not only are they calling now for a resolution to be reached between Warrior Met and the UMWA, they call out some of the financial decisions that the executive board of Warrior Met made. Listen to this. We don't believe key executives should be rewarded when the company has been impacted by negatively by the ongoing labor dispute and has related fall in production, which has meant it has not been able to take advantage of favorable market conditions and maximize long-term value. This is investor speak for you freaking dumbass. Why are you taking $1 million bonuses while your production has been down? What are you doing, man? Because for the last year, steel has been more profitable than it has in the last decade or more. The price of steel has gone through the roof. And because of Warrior Met's obstinate negotiating with the UMWA, they have not been able to take full advantage of this opportunity. They have lost a potential $1 billion in revenue because of idled production, because they are only running at something like 20-30% capacity. If they were running at 100% capacity, if they were increasing capacity because they were bringing more people into Warrior Met and therefore into the union, it could even be more than $1 billion of revenue. But they lost out on $1 billion of revenue, which would have not only gone to the workers, it would have also gone into the business. They could have invested it. They could have even given it to themselves. But instead of that, they have chosen a path of keeping these folks out of work for a whole year, and they're rewarding themselves with inordinate bonuses. The UMWA put out a statement on this saying, when even the giant Wall Street firms that own your company say enough is enough, It's time to end the strike. The workers, families, and communities Warrior Met continues to hold hostage by needlessly prolonging this ordeal need to get back to a sense of normalcy, and the company needs to get back to full production with an experienced workforce, especially at this time of unprecedented coal prices. Let's settle this now. And that's exactly right. There's, we were just talking with Yaffe about incentives. The capitalist incentive, if it was just profit, if it was just about profit, they would have given these folks what they wanted, and they would have given them more, frankly. Anything that it took to get them back in the mines, that's what they would have done. If they were only motivated by profit, that's what they would have done. But they're not only motivated by profit.
Right.
They're not only motivated by profit. They are also motivated by greed, and they are motivated by their power-hungry insistence that they have total dictatorial control over the people that they have in their employ. Those are other incentives that people don't like to talk about. Those are the other incentives that are at play that people don't want to talk about. Because it's clear because of the price of coal, because of what they're asking for. Now, it would be one thing if their negotiating position was, give us ownership of the company or we walk. Now, that's a position that I would support. But that's, frankly, the idea of property rights in this country that anybody who, the idea that because you happen to own the business it gives you total right to continue owning the thing and continue profiting. It just doesn't make any sense to me. These people, they don't live in Alabama. They have never been in a coal mine. They just sit up in New York trading stocks, in D.C. trading stocks, in Australia trading stocks. Why do they get to decide what happens in Alabama, in an Alabama coal mine? Just because they have billions of dollars? That's absurd. It's absurd. So, but this is very good. This is good news, because maybe BlackRock is a little bit more purely motivated by profit, and maybe the people at Warrior Met have a little bit more of the greed and power stuff going on. So let's hope for a resolution in the near term on that. Very good news.
Hoping so.
So another thing that happened with the UMWA last week that was not as unambiguously good was that they endorsed Tim James. And they endorsed Tim James likely because of stuff like this. Adam, let's play that clip from his rally with the coal miners.
We need to always be grateful to the people who help us pull the natural resources from the ground. Now, you're not going to get me in a tube that goes down 2,000 feet. I can't do it. I can't. I don't even like elevators. That's why I will always be supportive of our miners and energy workers who have the knowledge and the skill to reach that goal. I love this culture, the mining culture, generation after generation of men and women who do this work, and we've got to protect it any way that we can. I've been concerned about this strike. Been going on for over a year. They tell me, I think it's the oldest one in Alabama ever. Is that right? It's affecting about 900 miners and their families, and it continues to be unnecessarily hurt families in this state. Look, I believe in free enterprise. I believe in fair collective bargaining. But the owner of this mine, Warrior Met Coal, and their principal partner, BlackRock, the largest private equity company in the world, obviously do not share my belief in fairness. Their website says, we want to provide for our employees with highly attractive compensation, yet their tactics tell a different story. They're requiring, and I'm telling y'all, when people hear this, steam's going to come out of their ears. It's so wrong. They're requiring that Alabama miners agree to be terminated if they miss 4 work days for any reason. Any reason, that's right. If you get COVID, pneumonia, you're out of work, for 4 days they want to fire you. At the same time, they are making record profits. Now, I've got no problem with profits. I like profits. That's what it's about. But fairness is in order. This is unadulterated greed and corporate bullying on a scale that I have never seen in my life. About 900, think about how many families that is. 900 families are hurting, out of work, because they will not acquiesce to Warrior Met and BlackRock's unfair and offensive demands. I don't blame them. I wouldn't either. Union or no union. It's inexcusable. This strike needs to end now, and the Alabama miners must go back to work. That's all I'm going to say on that today. But if it doesn't get better, there'll be another day to talk about this. We all know one of the greatest.
Yeah, so that's the and you know that was pretty good. That was some good rhetoric. Those were some good words. And you know, so I don't want to be too I understand that they're in a more difficult situation materially than I've ever been in and hope to ever be in. I really hope that I'm never in a situation where I have to be on strike for 13 months. That would be really difficult. And you know, once you start getting to that, once you start getting there, you have to, you start kind of grasping at straws. And Tim James has said a lot of the correct things. He said he's going to immediately stop the use of state troopers. He said that he is going to fight the injunctions. He said that he's going to use the office of the governor to attempt to mediate the strike in a way that, governors throughout the United States history have done, in a way that Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh did with the Kellogg strike. You know, that's something that he said he's going to do. And so that's good, and I hope he does that. His father's history would not lead us to believe that he's going to do that because of what his father did to the paper mill strikers in 1980. So there's cause for concern there. There's cause to doubt, as there always is with any politician. But certainly the current governor isn't doing anything on this issue, and Lou Burdett has said some similar things, but I don't. I talked to his campaign manager the other day, and I asked him if he had gotten an invitation to, or I asked him if Lou Burdett interviewed for the endorsement, and he said he didn't. He said that they didn't get a letter. Now, the people that I've talked to in the mine workers said that they sent a letter to every candidate. So I don't know if Lou Burdett just missed it, or if it went to the wrong address, or if maybe the only person that they actually engaged is Tim James. I mean, I really don't know. But for whatever reason, I think Tim James was the only person to interview. And, I mean, you know, to be fair, unions make endorsements like all the time, and if you wanted to make this an issue, Lou Burdett could have proactively gone after the miners' endorsement. You know, you don't have to, you know, you don't, here is a tip, a pro tip to future politicians. You don't have to wait on a gold-plated letter of invitation to support workers. There's a tip.
Right.
But Tim James was apparently the only person who interviewed for the endorsement, and he said a lot of good things. So it's, you know, it's not unreasonable. It is not, I don't think it's beyond the pale. I don't think the endorsement itself is beyond the pale. And that's what I would say as far as that, because on any other issue, he's going to be basically the same as any other Republican. So if he can convincingly make the argument that he is going to be better for the coal miners on that issue, and he's going to be basically the same on the other issues, then it makes sense to endorse him, right? Makes sense. It's not unreasonable.
Right. I'd never vote for him, would never give him my money, but I do understand the rationale there.
Yes.
Like you said, he's essentially the only one who has really tried hard to stake out a position and get that endorsement. And you know, given the gravity of the strike and the duration of the strike, the UMWA members probably are going to be single-issue voters. And then this is a situation where you can't really begrudge someone for being a single-issue voter.
No kidding.
Now, you know, I don't know what the polling would look like if you polled all 900-plus members, rank and file, and just see how they felt about it. You know, that'd be interesting to see. But yeah, I agree. I can understand the endorsement. I can.
I can understand the endorsement, but what I can't understand, and what really, really hurt me deeply as a union member, as an officer of the AFL-CIO, as somebody who sees these people as my sisters and brothers, as an advocate for these people on these specific issues, as somebody who's spent an entire weekend down there raising money for them. This hurt me deeply, and I cannot understand it. Adam, let's play that clip.
But here's what Kay has done for our kids. She let mask mandates stay in place even after almost every state in the country lifted theirs, putting our kids farther behind in phonics, in reading, let alone the emotional drag of wearing a mask when they know in their spirit it's not right. She took no action on school choice. No action on the Marxist tools that are in our face, the critical race theory, the silly Common Core. This stuff is a failing story. It doesn't work. Done nothing. And no action to stop the radical LGBTQ plus agenda. Now, I have a question. How many of you folks know what the plus is? Because I do not. It's at the end. Anybody have an idea? I'm glad you don't. That's a good sign. Good. I don't know either, and I'm not going to look it up. But this agenda, she pushed it forward. She signed off on a $2 million state funding for the first LGBTQ+, the first transgender public school in the South. Right here in Birmingham, they call it the Magic City School. And they declare themselves as LGBTQ affirming. To affirm means to confirm that something is true. This is not true. This is a lie. This is in direct conflict and in opposition to the character and the nature of God, and we're not going to tolerate it in this state.
And we've said we understand the endorsement, and there's no condemnation from us about the endorsement. We understand the position that they're in, and we understand the necessity of getting these folks back to work. But you have to do that in a way that maintains your integrity and maintains your commitment to the working people of Alabama. And allowing him to, from a union hall, with union members behind him, clapping like seals, about how being gay is contrary to God's law and we won't allow it in Alabama. I mean, I know for a fact that there are gay folks and trans folks who have donated, who have been on charity streams for them, who have organized fundraisers for them, who have been very big supporters. There are socialists who have done that. There are organized Marxists who have helped these people. And not with the condition that, not with any condition, and certainly not with a condition that these folks agree with them on everything. But I think that solidarity is fundamental. Solidarity is fundamental. Solidarity to your sisters and brothers on the job is fundamental. You can't not have solidarity with working Alabamians, especially working Alabamians that have supported you. And I mean, seeing representatives, I mean, people who should know better, clapping. I can't get, I mean, it's difficult for me to even know what to say, because I would never allow in my union hall attacks on, I mean, certainly attacks on gay folks, attacks on coal miners, attacks on, as individuals. Like, it is contrary, like, I couldn't imagine myself saying it is contrary to God's law to, you know, to vote Republican, and we're not going to allow this in Alabama, and you know, by proxy, you're not going to be welcome in our union hall and at our events. I mean, I would never say that. I mean, there has to be some amount of diplomacy and solidarity that you extend to other people and to people that have supported you, and to people that, I mean, it's so disappointing.
Yeah. And I understand the hurt that you're feeling, because all of those people that Mr. James was bashing, the educators, the quote-unquote Marxist, which, believe me, would apply to any number of people, not just, actual Marxists. And, of course, LGBT folks, all of them being bashed by this candidate, these communities have come out for the miners. They have come out to support the miners during this strike. My guess is that if you added it up, all the gays and lesbians, all the socialists and other, leftist radicals, to use their kind of phrasing, if you added up everything that we've put together, my guess is that about 6 figures worth of contributions to the strike fund have come from those kinds of people. Mm-hmm. The people who Tim James believes are an affront to God and not welcome in this state.
Yeah.
And to me, when you are in a union, when you are in the labor movement, your focus should be on addition, not subtraction. It should be adding to our movement, respecting all human beings as worthy of dignity and value, regardless of your particular, religious beliefs, regardless of your particular orientation. The idea that we should associate the labor movement with such exclusion and with such bigotry and backwardsness, it is disturbing. So,
and they've been and folks in those groups have been supporting it since day one. 13 months ago.
Not showing up in the last 6 weeks of a political campaign to say some good words that contradict everything his own daddy did while he was in office.
Right.
Because we had multiple strikes while Fob James was in office. We know about what happened with those paper mill workers in Cortland. We know about the teachers in Walker County. We know how his father responded when working class Alabamians were out on strike.
Yeah.
So it's easy, talk is cheap, but history is valuable.
And even the talk is limited to only when he is asked about it.
Right.
He had a stump speech at a union hall, and we played that bit that we played at the beginning. That was it. That was all. That was the extent of his 25-minute speech. Was 3 minutes. 3 minutes on the strike in their union hall. The rest of it was the second thing that I just played. The rest of it was that played over and over for 20 minutes. That was the rest of his 25-minute speech, was just a bog standard reactionary anti-worker Republican stump speech. That was it. And like Adam said, he's coming in here parachuting in. Alabama workers used to hate carpetbaggers. Parachuting in at the last minute, trying to get their endorsement, and even then, barely paying attention to them, barely talking about them, barely platforming the issues that they're having, and only doing so when it's totally necessary. He doesn't bring this up in his interviews on conservative talk radio. He doesn't bring it up in his interviews or in his statements. He never brings this up if he's not asked or if he's not at the union hall. Whereas socialists, gay folks, trans folks, all educators have been on the picket line with them since day one, have been raising money with them since day one, have been supporting them from day one. Union members across the country supporting them from day one. Gay union members, day one. How many? I would be interested in tallying up the number of the donations that they received just from LGBT folks, and comparing that to the donations that they got from Republicans.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That would be a number I would be interested in seeing. I would be interested in seeing how many gay folks have been to their union halls, have been to their events, have been to their picket lines, and how many Republicans have that are not actually members of the union or family of them. Obviously, there are members of the union and their family that are Republicans, but people that are doing it as a part of their identity, as a part of their activism in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
How many random Republicans found it in their heart to donate money to this cause or to show up physically for this cause. You know,
and there aren't that many LGBT folks, but I would be willing to bet a significant amount of money that more LGBTQ plus folks, which they laughed at. Everybody in that union hall laughed with Tim James at that group of folks. I would be willing to bet a significant amount of money that more of those folks who their primary movement in the world as an activist is from kind of derivative of their LGBT identity have randomly come across the strike and donated and supported than the same can be said for Republicans who they're a Republican activist and they found this and they donated to it and shared it and all this stuff. I genuinely think that is the case.
I agree with you. I've seen Marxists, both actual Marxists and just people that they would label as Marxist, very, very adamant about supporting this strike and supporting the miners. I haven't seen many Church of Christ preachers and Southern Baptist church preachers out here rallying their flock to give money or doing live streams on YouTube or showing up to their rallies.
Their email list. How many emails has the Alabama Republican Party sent to donate to the fund? How many emails has Tim James sent to donate to the strike fund? How much money has Tim James donated to the strike fund? Has he even? I would actually be willing to bet he hasn't donated anything to the strike fund.
I bet you he's got more money to give
despite being a damn
than we
millionaire.
do. Yeah, he's got more money in his bank account than I do. I can swear to you today.
And you've donated more to the strike fund than Tim James has.
I bet he has. I bet so. And
I mean, it's just so like.
And you know, something that's happening here, and something Jeb commented that sort of reminded me of this. It's something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but we are in the midst of a Red Scare. In this country, we've had multiple Red Scares. My argument as a student of history would be that it's never really gone away. It's just been so successful that it's faded. But the Red Scare never went away, and I think we're in a period now where we're experiencing that all over again, where we're seeing actual radicals and people who aren't radicals but are being labeled as such being targeted in Alabama and across this country. And there is a movement here to suppress speech, to censor classrooms, to divide the masses against one another, and to target minorities such as gay folks and trans folks, to target those who are on the left. It's I truly believe that we are experiencing that. We are in the midst of a modern Red Scare, and this rhetoric that's being pushed by people like Tim James is part of that. And if you know anything about the Red Scares that we've experienced, throughout the 20th century, it's a sad chapter in our history of labor, because unfortunately there were those in the labor movement, particularly those in leadership of these institutions, that went all in on the Red Scare. And that, if we want to talk about why is the labor movement not as strong as it used to be, well, that's a big part of it, because its most militant members, its most dedicated members, were purged from membership.
Yep.
In union after union. Certainly not all, but in too many. And the labor movement, when it was facing its toughest challenges, with the ascendance of neoliberalism and Reaganism, with the growth of globalization and outsourcing, when they needed to be stronger than ever, they had already purged from their ranks those considered to be too radical, those who were too gay, who were too red, it's, so when I listen to this kind of shit, it really does. It brings that up for me.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah, it's a big problem. I mean, and there have, and obviously, so because this has happened, I think that people can imagine that, there are other issues, but I have, I bit my tongue quite a lot. I bit my tongue quite a lot. And, so I'm not, I feel like it's kind of necessary to put it out there for the record, because this is something that they've done in public. This is something that they've done in the light of day. This isn't something that's happened on an individual level or something that they didn't put out there as a union. This is something that they have attached the names of their union to, and they put out statements about, and they have not made a statement about the hate that they allowed in their union hall. And I think it's incumbent on union members in Alabama to say to gay workers, to say to trans workers, to say to teachers who are union members, to say to black folks, to say to people who want to teach history that this is not okay. The labor movement is still there for you. I am still there for you. I will advocate for you. And you have a place in the movement. You have a place in the movement. You have a place in your union. Don't give it up because of folks like this.
Yeah. This is about the working class.
And there are tensions in the working class.
There are tensions in the working class. There are differences among us. That's true. But we can't allow ourselves to be divided in that way. The working class is all of us who have to sell our labor for a living. It's not just those who are white, male, Christian workers, which I know is the posturing we're getting from the right wing. And the more, that's a trap. It's a trap that's going to further weaken our movement and produce more hate and bigotry.
Yeah.
And, that doesn't change the righteousness of this cause, of these miners who are on strike, fighting back against corporate greed, fighting for dignity in their lives and the lives of their families. That's a righteous cause, and it will continue to be, and we will continue to support that, because it's not about the PAC fund. It's not about officers. It's not about even the institution itself. It's about the workers,
right,
and their struggle, and we will continue to support that struggle.
Yeah. We've got one more story. We wanted to talk about Starbucks, which is a little bit more fun. Starbucks bosses continue to cope and seethe. Let's put this up.
It is pretty funny to see.
It is pretty funny.
To see their
there's some stuff that's very serious and some stuff that's very funny. So we'll start off with this thing that's very serious. Yesterday, this is the ULP graphic. Yesterday, Starbucks announced pay increases, but said it was obligated to withhold them from unionized workers, which is a lie. Labor law experts they said to the New York Times, that is not true and that it's likely against the law to withhold. They would have to at least offer this package to the union. And that's illegal. It's clearly illegal. The law says you cannot punish for unionizing and you cannot reward for not unionizing. And so giving benefits to stores that are not unionizing is a reward for not unionizing. So what is, usually people have something that they point to. Usually they don't just make things totally out of whole cloth. So what is it that Starbucks is referring to when they say, oh, we're not allowed to withhold, or we're not allowed to offer you these benefits? We're not allowed to offer you these benefits. That's crazy. I hate it, but that's the way the law works in this country. Why are they saying that? They're saying that because once you've been unionized, the employer cannot unilaterally change the conditions of employment. They're not allowed to unilaterally change the conditions of employment. They have to bargain with the union and come to an agreement on that, or come to an impasse and implement it over their wishes. But there has to be bargaining over it. And so what they're saying is that we can't unilaterally implement these benefits, which is true. They can't unilaterally implement the benefits, but they can and legally have to, as the labor law experts told Noam Scheiber for the New York Times, they legally have to offer these benefits to the union workers for them to sign off on, in like a memorandum of understanding or like a shortened contract or something like that. They have to do that, because otherwise it's rewarding the workers who do not unionize and punishing the workers who do not, or who do unionize. Clearly illegal. But that's what they're doing because that's what they want to do. They want to reward people for not unionizing and punish people for unionizing. That's expressly what they want to do. And so that's a very, very bad thing that is happening right now. But, and that's happening despite the fact they're saying that they can't offer the benefits unilaterally, even though they are changing the conditions of employment unilaterally in negative ways, by cutting hours, by refusing to schedule people, things like that.
And they
taking
keep
people
firing,
off their health care.
They keep firing organizers.
Yes.
Over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, they're talking out of like three sides of their mouth here. But some good news is that, Starbucks workers met with Amazon workers, with President Biden last week. They had a conference and talked to the president. And so that confers on them like a certain sense of legitimacy that is very good. And Starbucks was very upset about that. They were very upset about that. They said in a letter to the president that
wah.
Yeah, they just cried.
Why are you so mean?
Yeah, why are you so mean? They were upset that they were deeply concerned that Starbucks was not invited to the meeting while union representatives were. And they say that they have a drastically more positive vision for our partners in our company than Workers United, which is just silly. And they also called it heartbreaking.
Jesus.
Yeah. It's great. We love it.
Well, from now on, I think we need to write a letter every time these capitalists get their invitations to Congress and the White House. We need our own letter.
Yes.
Why didn't you invite me?
Right. And the guy who wrote that, and I was looking for, and it's a bit of a stretch to include this clip because it's not relevant, but the guy who wrote that letter is also responsible for this absolutely glorious clip. I've been looking for a way to shoehorn this in, and I haven't really found it until I realized that he was the one who wrote this letter. And it's just like, these are the type of people that are trying to withhold basic constitutional rights from these workers, keep them down, keep them being paid less, keep them with no power in the workplace. These are the type of people that are doing that think that they're so much better than us. Play that clip, Adam.
Would this be the clip labeled dumbass?
Oh, yeah. That's the clip labeled dumbass.
Didn't see it in the notes, but my expert powers of deduction here. All right, coming right up.
I know a bit about both the national labor, the national NRLA, the National Labor's, the National Relations Labor Act. I also know a bit about the National Labor Review Board. And I know.
So there you go. I mean, he knows a few things about. he knows a few things about
the National Labor Review Board
and the National Labor Review Act. Labor.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to hate on somebody who gets tongue tied because Lord knows I can sound pretty incoherent. Those of you who are regular listeners probably know that, but I wish I had that man's salary though, because I am also capable of standing up there and making a fool of myself.
Yeah, Phew. That's pretty crazy. So that was a pretty fun clip. Let's go to some more coping and seething from Howie. Let's play that one.
Oh, goodness.
So when you love something so much, you almost want to do anything to defend it, to preserve it, to enhance it, like you would for your family. And for so many people at Starbucks, this has become their family. And how personal it is. And it is very personal, especially when you have an adversary that's threatening the very essence of what you believe to be true.
There you go.
So that's how he views his own workers, our partners, I should say. Partners. Because that's the adversary here. He is correct. There is an adversarial relationship. There's no doubt about that. And comments such as this really just make it clear and hammers it home that there is an adversarial relationship.
Yeah.
He could easily recognize all of these unions. They don't have to go through these extensive elections and all the BS that comes with it. He has the authority. Now that he's back as CEO of Starbucks, he has that authority. He could easily put out the memo, you know what, guys, you want a union? We'll recognize you.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can get started on negotiations and we don't have to go through all
like
this.
Partners.
Right. How about treat them like partners?
Yeah.
If I'm a partner with someone, I respect their wishes and desires. Someone who's my partner, if they decide they want to join an organization or if they want to do something different, okay, you're my partner. I'm going to recognize that. Let's talk about that and work through it. So, you know, I do love, though, when companies such as Starbucks and guys like this, when their mask comes off and all of the lofty, you know, liberal-sounding rhetoric that they love to champion, all it takes is a good old-fashioned labor battle, a labor struggle for them to really take the mask off and reveal who they are and what they're about.
Yeah, it's worth remembering every time that he comes up in the news that he was Hillary Clinton's Department of Labor pick. This was the guy that Hillary Clinton wanted heading up the Department of Labor.
So, yeah, we've got her running mate, Tim Kaine, out here defending Amazon. Her potential DOL appointee is literally now probably, up there with Jeff Bezos in terms of the most famous union buster in the world.
Yeah.
And wow, are we still wondering why the Clinton campaign floundered with working class people? It's pretty sad.
And let's play that clip of a Starbucks worker who, these are the people that he is saying are his adversary, which is, true in a certain class struggle sense, but he, in a dystopian Orwellian, genuinely actually Orwellian way, he calls them partners. And that's the image that he wants to project. But when they start trying to actually take some control, he calls them his adversary. These are the type of people that he is actually demonizing.
I just wish that I could take Howard Schultz and him enjoying his second yacht or whatever he's doing. I wish that I could take him and we could switch places for just a moment. When I was laying on the floor of my apartment so chemo sick that I could not move, crying and throwing up with an eviction notice on my door, trying to force myself to work a 9-hour Starbucks shift because otherwise I was going to lose not only my health care, but my place to live and any food that I had, when all I had was a pack of ramen in my cabinet. I just wish that we could switch places just so he could experience that fear and that helplessness where you physically are unable to do anything, and yet you have to drag yourself into work anyway, because if you don't, what else is going to happen to you?
Yeah.
Those are the people he's demonizing and considering to be his adversaries. People who just want to go to work, do a good job, get paid well, treated well, and live with dignity.
Yeah. and these are the people that, and this was just reported out yesterday, that that they have committed over 200 violations of the National Labor Relations Act just in Buffalo.
Wow.
To prevent from having a union. The regional director of the National Labor Relations Board in Buffalo, New York, issued a complaint Friday accusing Starbucks of 29 unfair labor practice charges that included over 200 violations of the National Labor Relations Act. The complaint stems from claims made by Starbucks Workers United against the company in Buffalo. Only in Buffalo. 200 violations of the National Labor Relations Act. How are there even 200 pieces of the, I don't even know how you do that, but
Right.
Starbucks did it. Yeah. Insane. Absolutely insane. And that's going to be it for us, though, Adam, unless you had anything else.
I did want to plug again. We were kind of running out of time on the radio, but there are some local actions happening in terms of this Supreme Court decision that's pending to revoke Roe Vs Wade and to attack a woman's right to bodily autonomy. So let me pull that back up, because I know there are folks who are probably wondering where's the next demonstration, where they should go. So I was told that there is a Bands Off Our Bodies Fight for Human Rights rally and march on May 21st. That's a Saturday at 1 o'clock at Big Spring Park here in Huntsville. Looks like it's going to be happening from 1 to 4 p.m. And there's a fundraiser for the Yellowhammer Fund. And if you are wondering, how can you support women, how you can support the right to choose, Yellowhammer Fund seems like an organization that, would be worthy of your support. If you have a few extra bucks, chip it their way. I know the Powerhouse down in Montgomery has long done great work along these lines. So I did want to throw that out there. But otherwise, that's about all I have. I want to wish a happy Mother's Day to everyone, especially to all of you who are mothers, and my hat's off to you. I'm a father myself, and just really appreciate everything that our mothers do for us, and really hate that you are not appreciated enough by our society and our political economy with the types of treatment that you truly deserve.
Yeah. So that's it. If you'd like to help us stay on the air, you can buy our new hat, make a one-time or recurring donation on our website, tvlr.fm. Share and follow online, on social media, stuff like that.
Please do share, and if you're not already subscribed on the various apps, that's the easy way to support us. If you don't mind sharing our stuff on your social media feeds, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it may be, share out our stuff.
Leave us a voicemail. Bad boss stories,
organizing
wins, organizing losses. Ask us a question, 844-899-TVLR. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller, and we will see you next week.
Bye, y'all.